Punctual. Let's use our energy, our collective energy, and call all the people from the foyer in. Come in. Come in. Ngenani. Wozani. Because we're going to start with this final panel. We're in the home stretch. This is a very important panel about funding. And in many ways, it's a beautiful follow-up and a necessary follow-up to the questions that were being raised right at the end of the previous panel. So let's talk about money. How do we play? How do we pay for heritage? How can heritage institutions in Africa and Europe ensure adequate, sustained resources to fulfill their missions in the context of scarce public resources? What are the present and potential roles of the private and public sectors, international donor agencies, state and non-state, the art market, the tourism sector, universities, real estate developers, and so on, because heritage is everywhere? What are effective and innovative operating modes and models? The moderator for this session is one of the incredible curators of this convening, Ngaire Blankenberg, who is the founding director of the Institute for Creative Repair. And she will be joined, yes, please give her a warm round of applause. Yes, 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 yes. And she will be joined by Dr. Paul Bayliss, Absa Senior Specialist, Art and Museum Curator, Lucy MacGarry, co-director of Latitudes Online and the Rand Merchant Bank Latitudes Art Fair, Ryan Pillay, Deputy Director, Arts, Culture and Heritage at Nelson Mandela University, Don Robertson, Head of Projects at Jozi, My Jozi, Laurent Serrano, Heritage Editor for Africa, Asia, Oceania, of Restitution of Cultural Property, Subdirectorate of Higher Education and Research. We were supposed to have a representative from DSAC, from the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. I didn't see them backstage. I don't know if you are in the audience. If you are in the audience, please gently make your way backstage to get mic'd, but I suspect you are not here. Sir, madam, they or them, friend or foe or colleague. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our panelists and our moderator, Ngaire Blankenberg. Oh, did you take your headsets back? Why? But I did say keep them. Okay, for those of you, please, who do not have headsets, who will need translation from English to French. One of our panelists is speaking French. Please, would you go and get headsets? You have -3 seconds. Gijima, Gijima, Gijima. I think we're good. I think we're in a good place. Yeah, I think let's start. Thank you so much, everybody. So straight after this session, we stay in the room. Hi, Tammy. Nice to see you. I haven't seen you all day. Straight after this session, we all stay in the room for our closing. Thank you so much, everybody, for just being a fantastic audience up until the last drop. Ngaire, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lebo. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Are we still hanging in there? It's getting late in the day. But we're talking about money now, which I'm sure will make us all very excited. So we're going to have some hard talk about money because I want to try and understand how all this money thing works, and I'm sure you do too. So I think what we're going to do, though, is start off with a basic assumption, which is that museums and heritage sites don't make money. They are not commercial enterprises, and I don't know any except for maybe the football museum in Barcelona that comes out with a profit, and that's only because there's a big fat shop next to it selling kit. So I don't think, so we're going to go from the point of view that museums and heritage sites and archives are not a commercial venture. They don't make money, and as someone pointed out earlier, admissions, ticket sales, very rarely will cover operating costs, not even at the Louvre, not even at the Tate, not at the British Museum when they have millions of visitors. So given that, The question then becomes, what are different funding models or sustainability models that we have to operate with, where we know it's not going to make profit? And that's what we're here to talk about a little bit today. So we have Dawn Robertson here, who has incredible experience across her career working for a long time in government, most recently at Constitution Hill, where she was the CEO, and now she's taken on a new project with Jozi, My Jozi, which is a primarily private initiative to activate the city of Joburg, and you can tell us a little bit more about that. Lucy MacGarry here, and I'm not skipping, I'm not going in order, I'm going in a cluster, started Latitudes online, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that project, but she has also had a very fulsome career working as a curator, running an art fair, starting Latitudes online, and so she's going to bring into this discussion a lot of her experience working with those various different models. And Ryan Pillay works at the Nelson Mandela University, and so works in the Arts and Culture division of that university. And so it's looking at arts and culture in the context of university funding. And then we have our two funders. So we have Paul Bayliss, so it's the givers and the receivers. So we have Paul Bayliss at the end here, who is at Absa. And sorry, I'm not doing the proper titles, but I just want you guys to know what they represent and why everyone is on this panel. And we have Laurence Rano, who is a representative of the French Foreign Ministry, or the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs. So we know that in this country, this conference is hosted by IFAS, and we know Goethe Institute, Pro Helvetia, British Council. So there's a lot of funding also from international donor agencies. So firstly, I'll go to you, Dawn. What was the financial model at Constitution Hill?
So Constitution Hill is funded by, so maybe just backtrack a little bit. There are two heritage sites that belong to province in Gauteng. One is the Cradle of Humankind, the other is Constitution Hill. So we get our funding straight from the province. So the funding model for Constitution Hill was, we had in the current financial year, which ends at the end of March, so I finished off at Constitution Hill at the end of last year, so I'm still within my period, was 55 million, which was not enough at all. Of that, 28 million came from government, which was like approximately 51% of our budget. And then those of you who know Constitution Hill, we have a lot of office facilities on site. We also had 2,000 parking bays underneath Con Hill, which brought in another 15% of the budget. But the greatest area of income outside of the government grant was our own earned revenue. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we start to dig deeper. Ticket sales only accounted for 8% of the money that we made at Constitution Hill. And then another area that really, really picked up because we turned it into a much more of a MICE-centered operational area was conferencing and events, which brought in about, the 18% comes from that as well, yeah. So,
but your model at Constitution Hill was very healthy. That's not the normal percentage breakdown of most government museums, is it?
No, not at all. So there were a lot of carte blanche exposés a few years ago around government museums, and they always were done from Con Hill because it was always seen as something that was well funded. That's starting to get a bit shaky. One that, Albie Sachs spoke yesterday about the Cradle of Humankind. Cradle of Humankind, and I was also managed the Cradle of Humankind for a long time when I was in tourism, was a very, very healthy model. But since people who don't understand heritage and museums have taken over, there's this expectation coming to what you said, that you must be self-sustainable. So yes, while they're quite healthy compared to local government institutions, I think we're heading in the same direction.
Okay, so we've got a government entity, province though, not national, right?
Not national. And by the way, Cradle of Humankind is the only World Heritage Site not funded by national. It's only funded by the province.
So we have government, and the government subsidy to Constitution Hill is only 50%.
Yeah, 51%.
Is that correct? 51%. And the rest of that has to be made up by your own activities and by some things that you have on site. Yeah. So parking, for example, conferences, other earned revenue opportunities. You'll talk a little bit more about some of the other ones, like food and et cetera, And admissions ticket sales is only 8%
Absolutely.
of that
And
revenue.
I also like to talk about ACBC. You know, not as it is in the Bible, but before COVID, what
Yeah.
existed and where we were at, and after COVID, where we are almost starting from rock bottom again and starting to build up to where we were before COVID hit. Because
Okay.
you must understand museums and heritage sites were closed for 2 years.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. So, Ryan, I'm going to go to you because it's a next kind of similar model. What is your model with the university museums?
All right. So universities, for the best part, are autonomous, public universities in South Africa, of which there are 26. And then there are a number of private institutions that don't fall in this particular model. In as much as we think we are autonomous, the biggest funding source for higher education is the government subsidy grant that's given. So that grant then has to be divvied up to look after the entire estate, the operation, everything that comes from that, including then every art entity that is housed within higher education. So it would come down to a particular division within the university and where that outfit, that cultural outfit then fits in. It could sit purely on the academic side, or it could then sit on the operations or the institutional side. So it then depends on your division what the percentage of that lion's share of the budget would be. So it's factored into operational costs. But more and more, over the past few years, there have been substantial cuts. In this financial year, for arts, culture, and heritage, there was a 7% cut in the budget for the university. So if we look at, on the one side, we're looking at a budget of about, and it's not specifically for arts, culture, and heritage. Very often within universities, they are lumped with other core functions, such as communication and marketing, and other similar sort of family, a suite of family. So we're there looking at a total budget of about 11 million, and then ring-fence specifically for arts, culture, and heritage outfits, entities, and activities, we're probably looking at about 3 million.
And what does that 3 million cover?
Yes.
Could you just maybe explain a little bit?
So the 3 million then would cover operations. It excludes salaries, because that's from a different pot entirely. Infrastructure, build, development, technology, advancement. That is not money for procurement. So I'm speaking business speak, it's not for acquisitions. Yes. That is funded through a different model, what we like to call in higher education fundraising. We have a fancy term, we call it advancement. So there's a specific advancement that has an office, that has a massive budget, that is meant to go and woo the likes of in order to then give funding for those particular projects and objects, as it were. Everybody knows that there isn't enough money in the fiscus to fund free higher education. So the first place that they are going to cut is, I reported to somebody who used to say to me, my work is nice to have. So when your leader looks at it, your work as a nice to have, when it comes up to divvying the budget, your nice to have comes last. So you don't become very popular when you try to fight in budget meetings and explain to people that culture is the full makeup of the entire institution, and culture really is its strategy. The other entity that I also, in terms of the abstract, I'll very briefly talk about is the South End Museum, very similar to the District 6 Museum. Now there, it's not government funded, it's completely private and community owned. They then operate on a budget of about 1.4 million per annum. And the sources of that are two predominant sources, the lotto, so please continue to buy lotto tickets, and also a smaller grant from the local municipality. And then we don't charge entry fee at that museum as well because of the ethos and for what it stands for. But that's also dwindling. So I've been charged with the task then to find new vehicles and new ways to bring in revenue that is a lot more sustainable.
And so just for clarity, at Nelson Mandela University, because South End Museum is its own community museum, and at Nelson Mandela University, what exactly, is it 2 museums? Is it, what is?
Yes.
So maybe just explain a little bit what that 11 million covers.
All right. So the 11 million would look at the archive, the institutional archive of the university. It would look at the archives and what used to be known in the old days. The Nelson Mandela University is formerly known as the University of Port Elizabeth. If you know anything about South Africa, there are 5 universities that are former what we refer to as Broederbond universities, and this was one of that. So there we look at, in the archives, in the library, you then look at the government-protected documents. That forms part of it, sort of the archive outfit. You then have the institutional gallery. The Absa Atelier Winners Award stuff also comes to the university. That is housed on a separate campus in the middle of the city. And then it looks at all the arts, culture, and heritage programmatic work. So the student interface, student societies. It looks at institutional and national jazz concerts. It looks at art competitions. It looks at maintaining the current inventory of all art objects and others. It then also covers the insurance of that particular asset of the university. I think that's all, yeah.
And is there any, so it's 100% funded through the university?
Yes. It's a DET grant, yes.
Okay. And so we're going to get a little bit about how the money is spent and a little bit what it covers, because I think salaries typically are 70-80% of any institutional budget anyway. So we can't compare your 55 to the 11 exactly like that, because yours includes salaries, right? And yours does not. So just to clarify. Lucy, can you tell us a little bit about your model?
Sure. So I'm from the private sector, so a little bit of a different approach. But artists need to sustain themselves financially. So what we did was we went about to create an organization that is responsible and transparent and allows artists to see themselves as entrepreneurs. And so what we did in 2019 is we started with really just the seed of an idea, so nothing. And we are now, 4 years later, we have Latitudes Online, which is the largest online platform for art from Africa, and RMB Latitudes Art Fair, an annual art fair, an award for women identifying artists, an international residency program, 2 educational skills development programs for artists and curators, as well as the Latitudes podcast, and an editorial department that actually puts out content every week. So in a short space of time, we've grown quite quickly, and I think and I perhaps hope that maybe some of the learnings as to how we've approached can be used in the museum and heritage sector. So the way that we actually funded is sort of 3 ways. Our online platform has very small memberships, and also we take commissions on sales, because we realized artists can't really afford to pay memberships. So we take a commission on sales in that way. But our largest and most significant way of funding our business has been through strategic partnerships and collaborations. And I actually, in preparing for this talk, I counted the number of partners we've had in the last 4 years. We've had 57 partners. So, it's been an amazing journey. And I actually just wanted to digress quickly to tell you a story about before I started Latitudes with my co-founder, Robertson, is when I was curating the South African Pavilion in Venice in 2017. Our team had a budget allocated from DAC, Department of Arts, Sports and Culture, and the budget was, meager, let's just say. So we needed to, we were actually showing Candice Braids and Mahal Modisi King with a highly technical exhibition, and we needed to raise extra funds. So we convinced the DAC to actually put into the contract that we could get additional partnerships and sponsorships. And that was amazing, because we were in 3 months able to raise almost more than 50% of the budget and put on a fabulous show, which was very well received. And we were so excited because we thought, this is amazing, it's going to carry on for future cohorts at the Biennale. And then the next year it was taken out. And I think that's a lost opportunity. So for us, partnerships is really where it's at. And then the last way that we kind of sustain ourselves is through multiple income streams. So we have like a consultancy and advisory. We have paid editorial and advertising, sales and commissions, as I mentioned. But just before I end off, the reason we've been able to secure these partnerships is really because everything in our business has to come back to the DNA of our business and our mission, which is to drive the arts community for change. And so this has been something that like-minded partners have seen and had wanted to be a part of and have wanted to support. So on the one side, our change and our mission is to widen and broaden the inclusivity of our collector base. And I'm very proud to say that most of the collectors at Latitudes are of color, and many have bought their artworks for the first time. And we have a really amazing community, and we're also encouraging intentional collecting. So, for example, sort of a collector, Ugandan collector, will only buy work by East African women artists, that kind of thing. Those kinds of conversations we're having, and they're super exciting, and change is happening. And then the other side is obviously artists, because artists historically, have had to have gallery representation to be at events like this art fair that's happening this weekend. That was something that we wanted to change. So we put artists alongside galleries, studios, nonprofit platforms, and gave them an equitable playing field. And we've had some incredible stories, yeah.
Okay,
sorry, that was a lot.
No, it's fantastic, and it's a huge success story, and that's why I'm going to just drill down a little bit on that. So can you explain what you mean by partnerships? That's not like just, hey, I'll be your buddy, right? Like they're...
Yeah, so, I mean, partnerships are sponsorships when you find a mutually beneficial relationship with someone, and that's the key for us. It's like we think it's come out of the CSI department for many corporates, and it's come into marketing where there are beautiful stories to be told, ways to access our community, where we leverage our influence in the ecosystem, that word that was used a lot in the last talk, to also to leverage it's an asset really, is our contribution, and also the community that we've created around that. So partnerships are sponsorships, like for example, R&B has now naming rights on our fair, but also the way that we've kept ourselves lean is with a lot of trade exchanges where there's no monetary conversation. It's literally just actually working together.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can you give us an example of a trade exchange?
Yeah, so we've got lots. So, for example, we try and keep our fixed operating costs really low, and so we partner with, for example, Workshop 17, which is a co-working space. Our team is based in Cape Town and Joburg, and we can work from there, and we give them reciprocal kind of advertising. And likewise, we've got a partnership with Lift Airlines for our team to fly around. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So, Paul, you also use this language of partnerships.
Correct.
And you're a funder. So how do you decide who you're going to partner with? Which means fund. Right?
And when people see a bank, they see money.
Yes.
Look, partnerships are crucial, I think, and I'm going to take a slight step back because I think let's understand the model. Mm-hmm. Because I think for anyone, approaching, let's say, a corporate, whether it's a financial institution or any other, to understand how that corporate actually works in terms of where do you go for money, because I think that's a big thing. And my first thing to say to anyone is do your homework. Understand the business to whom you're going for money for. But basically 3 pillars, if I can put it in essence, and you touched on 2 of them. One is your citizenship, or CSI, where a percentage of every corporate in South Africa is regulated to spend a certain percentage of their profits on CSI projects. So, and it must be an age thing, sorry, I know I can't give you that exact percentage, but if you look at just last year, corporates itself spent 13 billion, or just under 13 billion through the CSI. That does not impact in terms of what's coming through overseas funders and so on. That's purely South African corporates. And if you compare that figure to 2022 versus 2023, there's already a R1 billion increase from the previous year. Then you've got a marketing budget. So that really talks into sponsorships. So art fairs, a lot of art festivals out there. Those would be not from a citizenship or CSI perspective, but would talk more into your sponsorships aspect. You can have an example where both would talk into both pockets. And if I brought it home to Absa, one of our projects is the Absa Latitudes, which is an art-sponsored initiative outside our gallery. That both has a marketing aspect and it has a CSI aspect to it. But then on top of it, you've also got more business-related initiatives. Absa, with many of the other corporates around Joburg, is working with Jozi, my Jozi, and it's, you know, and within that space, it's not talking from a citizenship, it's not talking to a marketing, but it's talking to saying, how do we improve the environment around us, enabling us to continue doing the business that we need to be able to do. So there you've got, and that's, to understand the business model that is within it. And then within that, there's, I don't use the word competitor space, but there is a bit, but there's also collaborative space. So within citizenship, there is going to be a collaborative space where we might partner with other financial institutions and so on around a citizenship-based initiative. But we're not going to go in and compete with Investec in terms of the art fair this weekend, or R&B in terms of because that's more of a sponsorship-driven initiative. So I think it's to anyone who's going in is to really understand the lay of the land, but then to work on the partnerships. And partnerships then comes to, is there alignment? Is there a similarity in values? Are you talking to achieving the same goals? So one of the partnerships that we've enjoyed, as we've mentioned earlier through this convening, is our relationship with IFAS and the French Institute. We've taken that partnership, it's been 20 years in the making. And with any marriage, the challenges, you talk through it, the goods, the highs, the lows, but there's a commitment from both parties to make it work. And I think that's the important aspect. I mean, any marriage you go into, and I hate to use that analogy, you don't marry your partner because they've got a lot of money. Well, I hope not. If you are, please come. I'll give you marriage guidance afterwards. You know, you marry because there's alignment between the two of you, both from a values perspective. You've got similar goals and things like that. Our relationship with IFAS over 20 years has got that, and we've now built that relationship even further through the Alliance, and thanks to Sophie and that, where we've now continued to open doors, where we're now working with the Alliance from, say, Nigeria and other countries and so on. So I think it's around that, wherever you're going into, and I'd say to anyone, don't look for the short one. Don't look at, if you're going for a funding model, look at it as if you're going into until death do us part, give them that analogy. It should be a long-term relationship, and you're working upon it, you know, building that partnership through the years.
And so, for you and for most corporates, which is the bigger budget, marketing and CSI? That's one question. And then, what's the difference in terms of what you would fund under CSI and what you would fund under the marketing budget?
I would say generally marketing budgets tend to be greater. I'm going to be honest. CSI, and I think this now comes to, we were speaking earlier, if you're going to approach any corporate, make sure your house is in order. Are you registered? Do you have good governance in place, et cetera, and we can go through that whole tick box. But as most, from a CSI perspective, are you registered PBO, NGO, things like that? So it's not from a CC or commercial. So that you've been able to tap in because there's a tax rebate and everything that's then associated with that from a citizenship perspective. From a marketing perspective, it doesn't Some corporates might say, well, it has to be still registered PBO or something, but others no. Then you can still be a business enterprise and things like that. So, and unfortunately, sport is one of the biggest things, if you look at many corporates across the country, that receives the best in term from a marketing budget. But there tends to also be spin-offs around those initiatives that then talks into the citizenship aspect as well. So if I come back and a simplified example, if you look at our work that we've done through Atelier, we're working on supporting young emerging artists across the continent, which has a marketing aspect to it because we run in an art competition, they come in on stage, they get in a prize, they walk off. But then our citizenship approach is the continued relationship we have with those artists in empowering them to take so it's not just the prize money, but the empowerment aspect that then comes to them. So in many cases, if you position it right and look at the value set, you could tap into both, which then makes it more attractive in certain respects. Yeah.
Perfect. So here, Monsieur Serrano, you're in a similar situation, right? So could you maybe explain to us a little bit about how you fund as a funder from the Foreign Ministry, but also what are the different mechanisms of funding from the French government? Because it doesn't all come from the same place.
Oui, peut-être je vais commencer par dire que si je travaille au ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères, évidemment ce ministère n'est pas le seul impliqué dans les coopérations internationales et pas le seul à soutenir des projets. On a évidemment d'autres ministères, au premier chef le ministère de la Culture, mais évidemment d'autres acteurs également, et je pense notamment à l'Agence française de développement, qui est l'agence qui est chargée de mettre en œuvre la politique de la France en matière de solidarité internationale. Et donc, voilà, on a plusieurs acteurs avec tout de même une idée extrêmement importante, c'est d'avancer et de soutenir des projets en équipe France, c'est-à-dire de manière coordonnée entre les différents acteurs, justement. Donc si on prend un cas très concret, par exemple cet événement qui a été largement soutenu par l'IFAS, par l'ambassade, comment ça se passe? L'ambassade dispose de moyens pour financer des coopérations souvent de longue date. Voilà. Et puis surgit un projet, une idée, qui elle-même, cette idée est née d'un dialogue ancien, de coopération avec de nombreux partenaires, et on se dit, voilà, ce dialogue, on veut lui donner une autre échelle, on veut lui donner une autre ampleur, et on veut rassembler non plus discuter à 15 ou 20, mais on veut discuter à 300 personnes. Ça, évidemment, ça a un coût important, et donc l'ambassade peut se tourner vers le ministère à Paris, vers son ministère de tutelle, et dire, voilà, j'ai un bon projet, et je voudrais des fonds supplémentaires. Et c'est comme ça que cela fonctionne. On nous envoie un dossier, je ne vais pas rentrer trop dans les détails techniques, mais l'ambassade produit un dossier qui est envoyé, et puis à Paris, on a une commission, on regarde les différents dossiers envoyés par les ambassades, et on décide en effet d'attribuer un budget supplémentaire pour un projet spécifique. Celui-ci, par exemple, c'est un projet qui n'a pas donné lieu à beaucoup de discussions à Paris, parce qu'on l'a trouvé très bon dès le départ. D'abord, on nous a expliqué, et c'est peut-être le premier critère, puisque si on cherche des critères de sélection, pour ces projets-là, que l'on va financer sur un fonds particulier, qu'on appelle Fonds Équipe France, voilà, qui est un fonds supplémentaire, on va d'abord choisir comme critère la solidité du projet en lien avec les partenaires. Donc on veut un projet, on veut voir qu'à l'origine du projet, on a des discussions anciennes, on a des partenariats, on a des acteurs locaux, et surtout que ce projet a été pensé avec ces acteurs locaux. Ce n'est pas un projet français et on associe, c'est un projet qui a été, le mot a été plusieurs fois utilisé, mais il est essentiel du point de vue du ministère, c'est un projet qui a été co-construit. Voilà, l'idée d'une co-construction, c'est quand même une idée fondamentale, et c'est peut-être le premier des critères de sélection des dossiers. Le fond du projet était lui-même particulièrement intéressant. On a eu plusieurs, comme ça, ambassades qui ont organisé des événements où il s'agit de faire dialoguer, de dialoguer avec la société civile, de dialoguer, on parlait avec, évidemment, la culture, vous l'avez dit très clairement au départ, ça a un coût, la culture, ça ne rapporte pas d'argent en général. Donc ça a un coût, mais il y a aussi des entreprises, de jeunes entreprises. Il y a de l'entrepreneuriat qui peut être développé autour des activités culturelles. Donc c'est tout cela, la continuité entre le patrimoine, la valorisation à travers des industries créatives, eh bien tout cela, évidemment, c'est ce que l'on cherche à soutenir à travers ce fonds. Ah, je suis désolé, peut-être.
Okay, I was waiting for a little break, and then I was going to just quickly translate it to everyone. So this is the break. So essentially what we're talking about, you guys can chime in who've been hearing the translation if I miss something, is understanding how the French Ministry of Culture funds through the example of IFAS, the conference. And so essentially what happens is the embassy, the French embassy, has a certain amount of money to put on projects, and then you are like, okay, I need a top up, so I now apply to the French ministry, you review the project, and you decide, okay, we're gonna give you money. And the criteria for selection is whether you've done it as a partnership project, correct? So whether you have partners that are on the ground, it's not just a French-only imposition project, but it's a partnership on the ground. And I think that's it, where we were.
Co-construction is an important word as well.
Yeah, and it's co-constructed together. All right, keep going. What are the other criteria?
Alors, on a... Tout le monde a la traduction maintenant. On a d'autres critères, évidemment. Parmi les critères, mais ça, ce sont des critères généraux qui ne tiennent pas uniquement... ce fonds ne sert pas exclusivement à financer des projets culturels. Il y a d'autres projets qui sont liés à l'éducation, etc. Donc ce n'est pas exclusivement des projets culturels, mais pour tous ces projets, il y a des critères qui sont désormais utilisés par énormément d'organisations internationales. C'est la promotion de l'égalité femmes-hommes, par exemple. C'est la prise en compte, pour nous, de la jeunesse. Voilà, il y a toute une série de critères qui sont pris en compte pour dire oui, nous sommes prêts à donner des crédits supplémentaires à l'ambassade pour qu'elle puisse accompagner le projet, pour qu'elle puisse continuer de travailler avec ses partenaires, et puis créer un événement comme celui-ci où, de notre point de vue, l'intérêt aussi, on est une délégation française à être venue de Paris, mais aussi d'autres ambassades de la région. Pour nous, c'est important parce qu'on est là aussi, on l'a dit plusieurs fois, pour écouter. Voilà. Ce projet, il avait aussi de l'intérêt parce qu'on entend les voix, puisqu'on parle ici de l'Afrique, les voix africaines, des voix diverses, qui portent des points de vue. Qui peuvent être parfois critiques, y compris vis-à-vis de l'action de la France. On a parlé du sujet des restitutions, par exemple. Donc c'est ça que l'on cherche à soutenir, plus exactement à aider nos postes à soutenir, parce que ce sont nos postes, alors quand je dis nos postes, pardon, nos ambassades, je vais faire attention pour le traducteur, parce que quand on dit nos postes, on veut dire nos ambassades qui sont sur le terrain, qui dialoguent au quotidien avec les partenaires, qui décident d'accompagner, et nous donnons les moyens supplémentaires pour le faire.
And so, thank you. And so in addition to the foreign ministry, though, the embassies can go and get funding from, as you said, the Ministry of Culture and also Agence France Développement. So what is the difference between the money, just like the CSI and marketing budgets, what's the difference between funding that's coming from Agence France Développement, the big development agency, the foreign development agency, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry of Culture? Because this is pretty consistent with all international donors, right?
Oui.
Or government donors.
Alors, l'argent de l'Agence française de développement vient du ministère des Affaires étrangères au départ. Mais l'Agence française de développement dispose de moyens importants, puisque c'est elle qui met en œuvre la politique décidée en matière de solidarité internationale, de développement. Donc on ne parle pas des mêmes budgets. Quand on soutient un projet comme celui-ci, on ne va peut-être pas dévoiler le montant exact, mais enfin, ça va de quelques dizaines à quelques centaines de milliers d'euros. Quand on organise un événement comme celui-ci, là, on a l'argent sur ce fonds. Quand il s'agit de faire quelque chose qui relève plus des infrastructures. Alors là, déjà, on passe évidemment à une autre échelle, on parle de plusieurs millions d'euros. Là aussi, notre fonds permet de le financer. Mais quand il s'agit de construire avec, par exemple, le gouvernement béninois, un nouveau musée, qui est le musée des rois et des Amazones du Dahomey, qui aura pour but, qui devra accueillir à terme les 26 œuvres qui ont été restituées. Alors là, c'est l'Agence française de développement, d'abord parce qu'elle a une expérience très importante, qui prend le relais, parce que là, on parle de montants de plusieurs dizaines de millions d'euros. Donc c'est l'Agence française de développement qui, sous la forme de subventions, mais aussi sous la forme de prêts, va être aux côtés du gouvernement béninois pour mener à bien le projet.
So I can't remember whether I'm allowed to ask this question or not. Oh no, she's going off script again. But what is approximately the total value that the French government is putting into culture for Southern Africa?
Alors,
Can you answer that?
alors pour l'Afrique du Sud, l'Afrique australe, je ne vais pas pouvoir vous répondre précisément, j'ai pas mon fichier Excel avec moi, mais en revanche, sur la période 2023, 2024 et 2025, alors je ne sais pas si on peut donner pour l'Afrique, on est autour, tout acteur français compris, on est autour de 90 millions d'euros.
For culture and heritage.
Pour la question, oui, pour les coopérations patrimoniales et les coopérations muséales. Là-dedans, par exemple, vous avez clairement le budget pour la construction du musée à Abomey au Bénin représente une part importante, évidemment. Et puis vous avez sur ces montants-là des projets qui sont plus modestes, hein, comme je l'ai dit. Si on parle d'échanges croisés, de mobilité croisée, si on parle y compris je vais utiliser en anglais, de capacity building ou de montée en compétences, les coûts sont tout de même moindres. Ouais.
Okay. And you're not off the hook either. What is the total budget from Absa for arts culture projects? Do you know? From CSI and marketing?
Can't mention off the top, I must be honest.
Yeah.
But and it's not that we've not disclosed it. It is reported in our annual report so anyone who wants to see that would be able to just go into our annual report, and it's common knowledge. I think what is important maybe just to mention and just to highlight again, because it also touches on what was being spoken about, marketing's not legislated. CSI budget is legislated, and you need to just understand that. I mean, the more profitable, more successful companies go in at a point in time, they would potentially might direct more funds into marketing. And I think, if we look at the impact that COVID had, a lot of corporates at the time pulled back on their marketing budget because the impact that COVID had on those organizations. And so it's also just to understand the landscape that's going on at any point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just come in there? I want to talk a bit more about the landscape also. When we talk about money, there are two parts to it. The one is the warm and fuzzy, oh, if you give me money, I can do this. Then there's the real part about money, around figures and evidence-based. So in South Africa, what Paul was alluding to, and this is the thing we don't like talking about, and particularly in this sector, because we feel it's not our responsibility to talk about it. But if we want to be sustainable as a sector, you've got to get real about the numbers. Yeah. So there's something legislated in this country called broad-based black economic empowerment. And what Paul is referring to, the greater the profit and the greater the turnover of a corporation in South Africa, that then goes through the audited financials, and the percentage of spend in the different elements in broad-based black economic empowerment talks to how much a company must spend, X number of millions in the different parts, and for the different types of individuals who are beneficiaries of that. Unemployed youth, women, black women, socioeconomic development, and. There are a number of elements. So a big part of the conversation is around in the arts and creative sector, heritage, is that NPOs, NGOs, trusts need to begin to understand strategically how to tap into that. That is money that is legislated for corporates to spend. If they do not spend, it means that they are unable to transact in certain business sectors in the country. So they have to spend that. So I think we need to become far more au fait with understanding how to tap into that. Yeah. That is legislated and it is highly regulated. It is audited annually. If you don't get a particular BE rating from level 1 to level 5, then you are unqualified. The other part around, we need to understand our strategies. And if you don't develop your strategy, the other word for strategy, what is your war plan? It's terrible, I know. We are about warm and fuzzy in the experience, right? But in order to continue the warm and the fuzzy in the experience and getting through those principles and those values, you've got to get real. How do you pay to keep the lights on?
Yeah.
So you've got to become far more strategic around that. 2 more points, and I'll be very brief, and then I'll shut up. I'm obviously from a university, so I must think this way, right? I'm wired to think this way. That's the, what did somebody say, the lingua franca of a university. You must beat at the thinking game. There's 2 things. One is called DE, developmental evaluation. Developmental evaluation filters into any project, big or small, but you then build the criteria and change it as the project goes along. You are able to say to prospective funders and donors, you are able to brag about it, okay, these are the developmental goals, given off the list of criterias that people want you to tick, all right, in order to meet. So I think we have to then become more evidence-based. It cannot be anecdotal. It cannot be warm and fuzzy. The warm and fuzzy is great. Use the warm and fuzzy for the pictures, right? But you have to then interpret the data, the financial data. There's Jen Snowball from Rhodes. She also is with another outfit, partner, SACO, South African Cultural Observatory. There's tons of free data that has been mined over the last couple of years that you can use as evidence in order to say, where is the sector, where's the sector gone, and particularly post-COVID. The last thing, which is even more important, how do you measure the impact of what it is you are doing? So there's something called social impact. The social impact is who is benefiting from it, how has the person's life changed around it, because every well-meaning project has a particular stakeholder that you want to benefit from the project. If you can use those methodologies and write them up and become comfortable to be able to write about these are the beneficiaries, this is how their lives have changed. Yes, there are criteria where they talk about how have you changed unemployment in a small town. Now, tangibly, you might not be able to give the person a permanent job, okay, with benefits, because people are gung-ho on having that. But were you able through this project to teach somebody something about what is now known as the gig economy? So we must become comfortable with using the tools that funders or corporations and governments use in order to meet their key performance areas.
Thank
I'll
you.
keep quiet now.
Thank you. No, thank you for that. This conversation should really go on for longer. There's so many questions. I want to take it back to you, Dawn, a little bit. And maybe you could talk about some of the lessons that you've learned through your different projects about how to stay sustainable.
Okay, but can I just pick up on something that Ryan said? One of the things with the BBBE Charter that I've found, Ryan, is that often corporates don't know how to use it. So there's also the opportunity to go to them and say, you can do this and you will achieve that. So let's not forget that as well. So if you think about the projects that I've run, both the Cradle of Humankind and Constitution Hill were Blue IQ projects. And the project I'm working on now, for that matter, the Nelson Mandela Bridge, was also a Blue IQ project. And they were economic drivers, okay? So Constitution Hill was established by Blue IQ as an urban regeneration project. It wasn't first about being a heritage project. It was about urban regeneration. And the same thing in the Cradle of Humankind. It was going into a rural area and putting in a tourism initiative that was going to kind of improve that community, and it did. I mean, when Cradle of Humankind and Maropeng were built, there were less than 50 businesses in the area. Now there's over 450, you know, so it did work. So I think that's important because it's not like other museums or heritage sites that were really about collections and stuff like that. It's very much been an economic driver. And the fact that both of these organizations sit underneath the Department of Economic Development and GGDA as that. So in terms of the kinds of things that we had to do at Constitution Hill, when I first came into Constitution Hill 7 years ago, they were really just about taking tours around the site, renting out some facilities, and maybe doing a conference here or there. So it was really about understanding the nature of the beast. And when we looked at it, the things that we had to do was increase dwell time and get repeat visitation. And how do you do that when you don't have temporary exhibitions, you don't have reasons why people have to come in? So one of the first things was just understanding our target markets and understanding what our USP was. So Constitution Hill is the home of the Constitution. So that was pretty obvious. And we really kind of started taking on the role of an activist museum. Walking a very thin line, being a government organization, becoming a safe space for communities to come in. And we started to attract a lot of young people. So as the young people increased, we then got slapped with the thing, okay, what's the biggest challenge we've had in government in the last 5 to 10 years? Job creation. So suddenly now as a museum and a heritage institution, how are you going to create jobs? So a lot of the things that we did was understanding that Constitution Hill was built on 2 pillars. One was art and one was justice. And Albie Sachs was very instrumental in the art component of that. And Ngaire, you were there at the beginning, so you'd understand. And then really looking at what we could do within the creative economy. So we've done lots of stuff in that space. We also looked at the province is very big on major eventing, and there's an eventing strategy and how do you use events to bring revenue in and tourism revenue in. So we went looking for an international festival, for example, and found Afropunk Festival, which was happening in the UK, Paris, Atlanta, New York, and lured them into South Africa and ran Afropunk for 3 years at Constitution Hill. I mean, it was phenomenal. We were doing sound checks with Anderson Park while Zuma was being kind of read his judgment in the Constitutional Court. You know, so we did those kind of things. But what it did was attracted young people. And I think that's the important thing. Constitution Hill, because of the fact it's become a home and a safe space for young people, has been allowed to grow. And even when Fees Must Fall happened, we became the safe place where the university could come and speak to the students, where the parents could take, we constantly were doing those kinds of things. And we actually then developed a program which was that kind of, when something happened, we became the safe space. So when there was the kind of xenophobic violence, for example, Conhill became the place where everybody came together and was able to kind of engage in a safe space. So I think that was also important in terms of making the space work. But then it was like, okay, so we've got to create jobs. And how do we create jobs? I mean, we did things like, I don't know if you're aware, but Constitution Hill is like 27 acres. I never ever had to go to a gym because I just had to walk up and down this hill. And we turned vacant buildings into studio spaces for creatives. So we took a 5-story building, we renovated 4 floors up to this point, and at this stage we've got something like 80 businesses, small creative businesses operating from that space. We've got temporary galleries in the space. And then we started bringing other organizations that support creatives. So Cape Craft and Design Institute, or the Design Institute, which was only based in Cape Town, now has a branch at Constitution Hill. During COVID, we always say, like, when everybody, Conhill is famous because it's got this wall around it and you can't see what's happening inside. Well, what we did in COVID, we built a recording studio for creatives. So while everybody was staying at home, we were actually constructing inside Constitution Hill. We used money from one of our funders, Nando's, where they would have sent creatives to the Milan Fair, and they couldn't do it in COVID, to renovate spaces in Conhill with those creatives. So it's really about finding the right kinds of partners, I think, but also just thinking out of the box. I try to do a similar, you said you worked at Zitsong. So one of our things was we didn't have a museum shop, and a lot of museums in South Africa don't have museum shops. And we wanted a museum shop that actually was filled with product. Ngaire, you're not wearing your product today. You are, okay? So look at Ngaire's arm there. So we worked with the creatives that we have on site, and we immersed them in Constitution Hill, what we were about. and then work with designers, design products that are sold in their shops. And then we did a similar exercise, and I want to point this, because I think it's a good example. We did a similar exercise with Ditsong. And we went into Ditsong, and we went into the Natural History Museum, the Cultural History Museum, and we developed several products, but it never went anywhere because people just couldn't see the value of where that could go. So I think what I'm saying, Ngaire, is I think two things for us, being an activist museum and being an entrepreneurial museum. You know, you really got to treat it like a business. And if I think about how we turned the Cradle of Humankind around, it was about bringing in people from the hospitality industry that understood it. Because very often heritage and museums have got, you know, your conservations and they really don't understand the kind of the commercial side of things. And Maropeng in particular turned around completely when we brought the right kind of people in to actually run the space. Yes, you need to have the head honcho stall, you know, keeping the balance right. But you need those commercial people that understand how to run hotels, how to ensure that the food is not slipping through and the drinks are not being diluted and stuff like that. Yeah.
No, fantastic. And I just wish we had more time, but Lucy, because I want to go to your entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit before about just always having different things.
Yes.
And I wonder, I mean, it would be great to understand how those things break down, because you just threw them away at the end. You're like, then we have a fair, and then we do this, and then we do this. And I was like, wait. So if you could just go through that a little bit more slowly, what are the different things that bring in income? And maybe just rate them in order of what brings in the most, I guess, which we've said is partnerships. But then for earned income.
Yeah, for earned income, so we built an online platform, which is a marketplace. It's a third-party marketplace. So this was quite a thing to actually build this on a piece of open source software, and it allows galleries, artists, studios, and nonprofits all to come on and have their own like miniature site. And they come on and they sell from there. So we realized that we have to be cognizant of where we are in a unique context. So we can't just be like an American platform that charges so many dollars to every single person. Like, we've got so many different models to make it affordable for people. And so if an artist can't afford, they give us a small commission on sales. And that's income for us. And if a gallery that's sitting you know, in Accra kind of would prefer just to pay us a monthly membership, then that's income for us. And then because we believe that in order to shift the needle in terms of representation in this art economy, we need to have content out there, rich content that actually gives people insight into these artists, that gives artists a voice that haven't had a voice. So we produce content all the time with writers. We support a lot of writers. That editorial is sometimes paid for, and sometimes we have advertising that accompanies that editorial in our newsletters and on our website. So that's income. Because we're selling artworks, we get a lot of inquiries from interior businesses, interior architects to fit out hotels. We've done a major project for Sun City, put hundreds of artworks in. Those kinds of projects keep us very busy.
And that's consulting.
And that's consulting, yeah.
Okay.
And then we do a lot of work with private collectors as well. So yeah, we have many.
And you started as an online model, and then from that you've now got an in-person model. Correct?
We actually started as a fair in 2019 as an alternate fair to FNB Art Joburg, and we started across the road at Nelson Mandela Square. And we were like the fringe fair at that time. And it was amazing. We got 7,000 people through the door on our first fair, and it was fantastic. Sandton City, one of our partners, gave us the rooftop of the whole mall, which was 6,000 square meters, to do our next event. So we were planning towards that when COVID happened. And then we realized it's something that we've always wanted to do, is build an online platform. But that was the true impetus, was like, now we have to build a platform. And everybody was scrambling to get online during COVID, but this gave so many people just an easier way to do that and to access collectors both locally and internationally. So now we gave it a break until we wanted to do the next fair, you know, really properly. So we waited until we could actually find the right partner, and then Rand Merchant Bank came on board, and we ran our first event last year. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so we only have like 5 minutes left, and it'd be great if you guys could stick around a little bit at the end, so if people have questions for anyone specifically, you can feel free to ask them. I guess I want to know about how do you sell yourselves? Like, what is your proposition? And I'll stay with you, Lucy, for a
Okay.
second. So,
Yeah.
what are you offering your partners?
Yeah. So something I really enjoy is just really finding like mutually beneficial projects where the sponsor, be it a financial institution, can gain access to our audience and vice versa, but we can tell incredible stories from the artists that we've worked with. That's mutually beneficial is absolutely key, otherwise it's not a sustainable relationship. And then doing your research before, so like working in the industry for 15 years, you identify the actual needs and the gaps that are needed to be fulfilled, and then you find the right partners, the like-minded people that actually want to help solve those issues or address those opportunities. And then the last thing was, when you do think you have a solution, is to create that solution for a uniquely African context. So instead of creating another art fair, which is like Eurocentric or American, and you feel like you could be anywhere in the world, do it in an African way, like do it for here, make it cool. So, and that's what gives us our Africanness and makes it so exciting. So those are our kind of winning propositions, yeah.
And Ryan, what about you? When you advocate for your little things from the university, what are you telling them? Like, why should they give you that money?
Yes. The university is called Nelson Mandela University, and I know the foundation is here as well. I saw Razi a little earlier. So one of the big draw cards is obviously the name, right? So the university trades off, or trade is not a language we use in higher education because people in higher education don't see it as a business model. For public good, youth, higher education, we are a university that has about 30,000 students. So you already have a platform for you to either get your brand to 30,000 students and about 4,000 staff members. You are building and contributing towards the next cohort of leaders. It's future thinking, it's trying to future-proof society. And then also the ethos of the university is around social justice. And a big drive in all higher education institutions is how do you build grit with an entrepreneurial spirit. So you are able to have this ready-made audience that you are able to plow back into. You are able to meet your company's own soft values, like Ubuntu, South Africa's Barter Pillay principles, humanity, and so on. So you approach it on the one hand as a social justice project, and on the second hand, you are able to influence the next spenders and buyers. So I think those are two big balancing acts that a university particularly goes out to market with.
Thank you. And Don, very quickly, because now you're hitting the road now with a new project, Jozi My Jozi, and you're trying to get funding for that, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So how do you sell that project?
I think that is really about, the earlier thing spoke about the ecosystem. Jozi My Jozi is a public-private civil society project. So it's like basically saying, unless we all come together and play our role, we're not actually going to make a difference. So, for example, Jozi My Jozi has signed an agreement, an MOU with the city of Joburg around certain projects, which gives us the ability to go in and do stuff in the city. They've contributed to the first big project, which is the restoration of the Nelson Mandela Bridge, which is actually a heritage site. And it's about building a movement with civil society, which is what we did at Constitution Hill as well. I spoke about the art and the justice. We had 2 festivals, Basho Huru, which was the youth festival with creativity, and then we always had the Human Rights Festival, which we grew into 2 brands, which really brought on like-minded partners. And I like what Lucy said about this kind of trade exchange. I always talk about win-win. Tell me what you need to do and I'll show you how I can help you do what you need to do. And that actually works in government as well. Particularly at this time of the year, if you're looking for money from government, coming to the end of the financial year at the province, and you go to them and you say, what did you have to achieve in terms of your annual performance plan? Let me show you how I can give it to you before the end of the month, and you get the money. So a lot of Conil works on that as well. But Jozi My Jozi, I think, is really bringing together the whole ecosystem And we're launching in April, and it's really about growing a movement of civil society, corporate businesses, and government to work together to fix the city that really, really has deteriorated over the last few years.
No, thank you very much. And I know we are 1 minute over time, but I just do want to get this last bit in for our funders. How does one get funding from either of you? What is the actual process and what do you look for?
Comme je l'ai dit au départ, ces projets doivent partir du terrain. Donc voilà, si vous avez un projet, des propositions à faire, s'il y a une demande, un besoin qui est exprimé, une envie de coopérer, il faut se tourner vers l'ambassade de France, vers notre conseiller culturel qui se trouve là, qui est celui, je parlais des différents acteurs qui intervenaient à l'international, et j'ai dit trop peu de mots sur le ministère de la Culture, qui évidemment, à travers notamment les établissements publics, dont il a la tutelle, qui est un acteur central. On a besoin évidemment du ministère de la Culture pour qu'il mette à disposition, d'abord il a ses propres dispositifs, par exemple pour l'accueil de directeurs de musées nationaux, africains, ça a été le cas à plusieurs reprises au musée du Quai Branly Jacques Chirac, qui ont travaillé sur les objets originaires de leur pays dans la collection du musée. Ils ont leurs propres dispositifs et puis surtout, ils ont les établissements publics français qui peuvent, si les partenaires le souhaitent, s'il y a une demande, s'il y a un besoin qui est exprimé, travailler avec les partenaires pour, par exemple, de la montée en compétences, mais aussi d'autres sujets. Et l'expertise, au passage, on est bien d'accord, cette expertise, elle va dans les deux sens. Nos musées ont intérêt à ces coopérations et ils trouvent évidemment une source de connaissances nouvelles pour la gestion de leur collection, pour quantité de sujets qui les occupent au quotidien. Donc voilà, donc c'est notre conseiller culturel dans chaque pays. Vous avez quasiment dans chaque pays, vous avez des services culturels au sein de l'ambassade. C'est le conseiller culturel ou la conseillère culturelle qui est à la tête de ce service, avec l'Institut français également. On a beaucoup parlé de Sophie, qui a joué un rôle extrêmement important. Voilà, vous pouvez vous tourner vers l'Institut français aussi, et c'est avec eux que vous allez co-construire le projet et que ensuite l'ambassade va se tourner vers le ministère en disant voilà, on a ce dossier, ça nous paraît être une très bonne chose, nous souhaitons avoir des fonds supplémentaires. Pour terminer, pour conclure, vraiment pour que les gens comprennent vers qui ils doivent se tourner, c'est vraiment vers le service culturel, vers ici notre conseiller culturel, qui est un peu la tour de contrôle, qui est celui qui est capable de rassembler l'ensemble des services français, des acteurs français qui interviennent pour aller dans le même sens, pour mener à bien un projet.
Okay, so we got that. Paul, yourself, last word. If someone wants to get money from Absa, theoretically, what does one have to do other than go to a bank machine?
You took the words out of my mouth. First, open Absa bank account, please.
Right.
Look, go on the website and I think have a look. You'll see the areas, I think importantly, what are pillars that we support within citizenship, what we support within sponsorships and so on. And within that, you'll be directed to the relevant person or email and things like that. And then from that. But if I can just also add, get your own house in order first. Don't just send a one line and say, hello, I need money, and end it there. Pull together a robust proposal and things like that. I think that is important thing. And if I can sow one other seed, if I may. Don't always think about money. What I say about that is one of the things that business has is got the skill set of people within its organization. So you might also say, well, I can't necessarily get the R1 million from an organization to fund my project. But could I make use of one or two of your people that get seconded across to me, whether it's for a certain period or whatever, to assist in helping me to write a business proposal or develop a project or whatever. So as Dawn said, think laterally, think creatively, and like a marriage, if you never ask, you're never going to get the positive yes, and you're never going to walk down that aisle. So yes.
And maybe just to say that 2 people from Absa are seconded into Jozi my Jozi, so it's working.
Right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. A very interesting discussion. Thank you all.